welcome to my one of a bite-sized tutorial. It's been a very long time since I actually made one of the tutorials, and I just after a long break from doing anything in this direction, I decided to come back and doing some of these tutorials for you guys. It's just been a very busy year for me, but anyway, see what we can do. And I mean, this is actually in this today's topic is I actually want us to focus on how we can create a motion blurred wheels rotation, for example, or in the car and anything else around the car. It's just to make the circular motion blur effect. And it's very common when you see like lots of sports cars and the illustrations and how it should be taken in commercials. And I thought maybe this is something worth you guys maybe look into it if you guys want to, especially when you create animations or just static images with the motion blur effect on it. And it's just like pick some of these Google images. I found that this Jaguar has this effect, and mostly those effects are usually done after later as a post-process effect. Is to use motion blur, is to create this in Photoshop. They literally people tend to artists Photoshop these, and also maybe to take the a good picture while doing some videos, but also you can do this using CGI animations these days, and you can replicate similar idea. But in general, what people tend to do is to do quick Photoshop work on this. But anyway, this can be done as well in Unreal, and it's also what's good about Unreal is you can actually create animation, or it's also you can use this animation sequence and you pick up one of the render images and use it as an illustration as well. So in today's lesson, I'm trying to show you how we can replicate the same effect. And pretty much in Unreal what you can do is either do two options to animate the movement of the car. Is either you can export from 3D applications like Maya, Blender, Cinema 4D, or 3ds Max, and then the animation import directly to Unreal, or you can basically create the motion of the car, especially make the car circular motion of each wheel rotate, and do it inside the blueprints, level blueprint, or you can do it main blueprint, so however you want to do it, as long as there's a motion in the car. And the way I'll do it, instead of I'll save you guys work, is to actually do it within the blueprint, just make things a lot easier. So this is going to be very for us important step. And then later on I'll show you how you can actually later on do much more cool stuff with Movie Render Queue, just to get better effects. So for the time being, let's start. We'll see what we can do. So this is the project I used before in one of the car scenes, especially like animations for the little one personal project I've been working on. And of course, maybe most of you, may not most of you, but some of you might be familiar with the demo I've created before with the Devo driving through a tunnel. And as you can see, it has this very cool effect of the circular motion blur there. Literally, I don't know if you can zoom that. I can't. So yeah, so you can see literally, it's the pinnacle part of getting the car the motion as it drives, depending on the speed, of course. And you can see how the camera moves away and the motion blur is slightly still there. And of course, to get this effect, there's a way around this, to basically use a few settings with the motion blur, and then of course they use subsampling methods as it use numbers of subsamples that are going to be rendered within the frame, and which I'm actually gonna show you within that little bite-sized tutorial. At the moment, the way it's done is, of course, I have all the small parts and make sure they're all movable. And the way I done it, I use this like a part of one of the mesh models, and this is a bottom model. So in that instance, it's good to have that, because at the moment what we want to do is to use one of these axes to move the car forward. So in that instance, as you can see, I move this car here. So the location changes from A to B. And make sure that your car, the wheels of the car are rigged within as parented to the car. So you see all the parts of the model, which is the main one here. So once you touch it, and you see the car is moving straight, you want to make sure the car is moving in a straight line. And the next bit is to make sure your wheels are rotating in the right axis. So, and make sure the wheels itself are rotating. Of course, don't worry about this because I'm going to use within the blueprint, because that's why, as you can see, I turned it into blueprint. So when you have wheels, for example, you can always go back and basically the wheels that exist as static mesh convert into blueprint. And this is one way to do it, but because this is already ready, I'm not going to teach you how to turn this in blueprint. I'll just hopefully you guys have some knowledge of blueprints in that instance. But anyway, this is very simple to do. There's not too complicated about it. But once you have this set as a blueprint, make sure that within the blueprint of your wheel, your parent is going to be wheel. In that instance, this is my wheel. And make sure your caliper is out, so that's not part of the scene. It's not part of the parent. This is your children here. This is your children right inside it. And now what I can do is to rotate it. So as you can see, of the motion that I have right here, it rotates perfectly fine. So as you can see, the motion of this wheel rotates perfectly fine. So there's a difference between this rotation within that scene and the rotation with this scene within the inside the blueprint. Hence, that's the reason why I decided to go for the main blueprint, because everything is literally calculated within this blueprint, so that it's a little easier to adjust as well as to avoid any axis gimbal complications along the process, because you don't want to have like very nasty effects coming up after, and you're gonna have to deal with fixing the axis in different program. Whereas you can just do that is to create a blueprint, and it resets all the transformations for you within the blueprint. So the next thing I want to do is to use this, but because I'm using this as the bottom, so everything's parented to this parent here, all these children here. So this is the one which I'm going to use. Let's move a little bit car a little bit further backward, and so once I got it, I can open up my blueprint here, main blueprint. So remember, open out your level blueprint. This is your level blueprint, and drag your main car's bottom that you're going to use to translate your car. Drop it here, and then what you want to do is to pick up those wheels, because we don't really care about those two wheels. We're not going to see them in the camera. The only thing we care is those two wheels here. So if you go select them too, and just do the same thing, drag and drop, and then you can see now I got those two wheels in. And make sure that we are going to use even thick for this, because every single frame you're going to be using, it's going to be calculating the speed of the car's motion as well as the rotation of the wheels. So now what I want to do is to use the transform just for the car itself. So in that instance, I'm going to check very quickly. So in this instance, what we want to do is to use add our location for the transform. So every time we move forward, there's going to be added a float value to the car motion. So that means it will be every single frame it will iterate then another increment, another value, and then it will add additional keep adding the value to the existing value, and it will make the car move forward. So for this one, what you want to do is to add a local transform, and let's just connect these two. And what you want to do is to make a transform. And we don't, of course, there are a few ways to, of course, enable those values. You can always split the struct spin, and then in that instance you can either do this again, and that turns the flow. But I can show you that there are functions that are ready for you that they can just literally make the transform from existing values of the other variables, and then turn into one existing variable that's new transform here. So that saves you a bit more time. And for this now, what you want to do is from this location we can just split the struct spin, so we don't make things messy within that one function, the target actor here. We don't make it messy within that function. So next bit what you want to do is to, because we want to increment every value for this for that car to move. So in that case, I want to look for float plus float. But first, let's create our variable, and that instance will be our drive. We just call it drive. Let's turn this into a float. Once you got the float, and just get it set as a get, and this will be our secondary, and then this is gonna be calculated every second our frame within. So we calculate every frame within a second, and once we're happy, we just have to make sure. Sometimes you have to be very careful where you are pinning to, because sometimes you think because as it moves, as in that instance, the car itself, it represents that it actually moves at the x values. As you can see, it changes, but in reality it can move differently. So but let's just give it a test and see how it goes. So let's just see. I'm gonna maybe click as it says there, let's set it to x location axis. Let's give it a try and see how that works. So now you see the car is moving, but it's moving sideways, so it's a wrong complete direction. So it's just slightly moved towards the left, which is wrong, of course. So to fix this, obviously, what we need to do is to set the different, and I think this is why, because x and y are literally perpendicular to each other. Because z is definitely going either. It will depend on the different axis. So in that instance, depending what software you're using to export, let's say Maya or Cinema 4D, any other ones, there's always have to keep in mind as you export it, check your settings as how you export your car or any model, because this may depend on how that will be portrayed inside the editor, and how this can also affect your transform rotations later on. So anyway, just basically you have to test every single one of the values and see variables and see which one works the best for you. But let's just test y, see that how it works. I want to make sure that I am moving to 1, and then let's try. Okay, so this is the one that it dictates me to move forward, which is great. That's what we need. So now let's focus on our rotation of the wheels. So rotation, the only way you can achieve rotation is to, if you, as you remember, we went to our wheel and we picked the parent that we can now use to focus on our rotation. So that in that instance we are going to use this. So we're going to use that. This is our parent. So we're going to use this component mesh, and we are going to attach this inside our level blueprint. So to do it, of course, our name of this wheel set here is, it says wheel set 3 because I've duplicated wheel set 3. So this is actually, in that instance I call wheel set 3 because that's how it's named there inside my directory. But don't worry about it, because I literally, all I can do is just for the better, not to be very confused, I'm gonna copy it, and I'm just gonna replace the name for this, the same do for this, just to avoid any naming issues. Okay, we got these two. So now what we can do is to use our level blueprint, and I'm gonna use this one, add relative rotation as our rotation. Now let's look for make rotator. Let's put this in, and I'm gonna create a new variable. This will be our rotation, and I am gonna see, let's see if I can add any values to this 10. Okay, I am going to make getter, and I believe that's x. Let me just double check it again, just to be clear. I am using x value for axis. This should be alright. So yeah, this is x. So if I'm moving this way, yeah, so this guy will be our minus. Sure, so this will be our minus. Let's make this minus 10. And do the same thing for that. So this will be SM tire set 2, and I think this is the one. Yes. And I'm gonna plug this in. And I'm going to add this into this. And yeah. Alright, I think we're good. So now you can see the wheels are rotating. And don't worry about this, those are just an artifacts from the motion blur. So the motion blur that I want you to guys look into is under global post-process or any post-processing volume you guys have already in the scene. So you just have to drag and drop here. But the one I'm looking at specifically is the motion blur here. So this is my configuration settings. And those are really, they pretty much set it for this car. Because depending on the location of your camera, how close you are to the wheels, you have to make sure that your object size of your motion blur that will show on your camera has to be depending on the size. It has to be very specific. It's just because it depends how your camera is closely set to. And I remember it's because I'm set this to 24 frames per second. So make sure you use those options. Just be very careful how you are dealing with them because you don't want to get those artifacts, but that's fine. It's an experiment, you can just play around with them. But next bit is to definitely set the camera. So let me just very quickly look for my camera. And I want to set the side camera. I want to go view it through, so pilot it. And because now it's quite blurred, that's fine. I want to now attach this one. So I want to just now look for our card that we are using to translate it. It's all now translated. So this is going to be, let's actually name this A camera. So this will be our first child under the parent. So we know where we can look for it. It's easier to navigate. And of course we need to fix this. So I will just literally disable it. I don't need that, that's fine. So I'm just gonna slightly increase the exposure just to be having some really cool look to the car. Exposure, it's gonna go to 10, that should be okay. Maybe 9.8, that's alright. Next bit is the camera. I think with the camera I'm kind of satisfied. I can slightly make it a bit closer or a bit further away. So of course, it all depends on people's taste, of course, how they want it. I mean, this is like a cool way to represent your car. So now you can see how the camera is literally viewed. And now what I want to do is to create a sequencer for that. So if I'm gonna just look for add level sequencer, and I'm just gonna call it sequencer motion blur. And I can just do is look for my camera, which I've created, drag and drop here. The binding is already created for you, so don't worry about this now. And then what you want to do is to basically, the camera will go to follow already, so don't worry about this. It's all gonna be literally stuck in there. The camera don't need to worry about moving the camera too much now. Let me just adjust the camera so that's in the perfect position. And I am now happy with that. I can just lock the transform happily super after. I'm gonna do this then. There we go. Now, as the animation will be rendered, of course we can literally set it all up in the movie render queue. So let's go very quickly. So this is already set up for me. I mean, I can always remove it, that's fine. I can always create a new one. This is the one I have. Make sure you save all in case you're gonna have any issues coming or something. You don't wanna, work something and suddenly Unreal crashes, and you wanna make sure you're all saved. And of course, I've created lots of presets for that, but I'll go through with you all together. So the way I do, of course, is making sure I have different rendering on. Anti-aliasing, definitely this is a must, and also constant variables. For this instance, this is let me just very quickly fix some of this. So this is the things as we don't really need that much, but Yeah, so this is the settings I'm actually using. Those are the console commands I'm actually using for to me to render. Obviously, you don't really need all of them because some of them would be literally ignored, or basically some of them being turned off. But for the way I do is to always keep them on in the console variables in case I might need them. But this is something that you should definitely have to take a snapshot of it, just copy them and put them in your console variables. So because you want to add some more settings, the way you can find them is just through here and just add them right from there. Of course, you can do this also at a higher resolution, but for this time being, I want just to show you how you can work with motion blur. So with the motion blur, in order for it to work, it all depends on how quickly the wheels are actually rotating, but how quickly also the car moves. But because in that instance we really care is the circular motion, so this is very tricky, and this is very particularly important for us to really be looking into the speed of the circular motion, but also how many subsampling we actually want to use them. So for me, the golden rule I've always been using, it works for me, is if I set those two as high as I can to capture more motion of the wheels, and subsampling, what basically means is that every single frame that you render, there'll be iterations of within the subsample additional frames added just to this one frame in order for you to create this motion of the car. So anyway, I'll show you what it looks like when you start rendering. For this, I don't think we need to go that high because we don't want to add too much time for this. So two, it's fine. With these two, all these options, you can pretty much add something, but I would highly recommend to keep it known. You can add MSA if you want to, but known this should be okay. And if you think you're happy with that, you can just quickly set to render local, and I think this should be okay. Just bear with me. I want to see the location. I want to make sure that where I know where I'm rendering to. Let me just do that very quickly. So I'm gonna render renders, and I am good to go. So this is just like a resolution that's set to for lots of work, and then I can always change it to 920 because I want to make sure I get faster results. For this, I always start with 201. Let's land it to 10. The lower resolutions faster will take to render entirely, because we want to test the motion blur effect to it. So once you're ready with that and we're happy with this, we can just basically click render, and then you should be able to see motion. As you can see now, within that one frame, it will add all these motions of the subsamples that have been created. As you can see, subsamples add extra every 20 to this frame. And when you add all those motions within that one frame, it kind of overlays and turns into a final result of the picture. Let me just show you what it looks like. So in that case, you see getting those motion. Obviously, it's not really perfect, but it's a good start. So you can see, you can switch from between each image to this image. And in order for you to literally eliminate all this, you can either increase the speed within the, let me just pause this so quickly I can demonstrate you what I mean. So what you can do is basically either you can increase the speed of the rotation you're going with, or what you can do is to basically go here and then basically add more subsamples to your render. So let me just remove those pictures, and I'm gonna slightly go and increase my rotation to maybe -15. See how that goes. Now let's try to see how that works. Yeah, so that means you need to, there's a pinnacle point to this rotation, circular motion, when you do it through Blueprint. So that means you can't go any higher, but you can go any lower. So this is at this specific point that you can reach out to. And I think let's try -12 and see if that works fine with this. So you need to always keep experimenting, keep figure out what is the best value, and then just view what your render looks like on the final on the final stage. So it's a bit of a experimentation process for anyone. So it depends how fast that your car moves and how fast you want the car move. But this, what I'm just representing to you, this is one way of doing it. And if you're really into doing lots of motion, lots of car renders with lots of motion blur, there's one way of doing it. And obviously, you can all do is to achieve this entirely using it, just doing and animating in this a different program, and then the animation can be exported later on. So yes, so it needs to be a little bit higher. So what happened is it's actually sort of must be lower. So it all depends on the values you use. So it needs to be slightly lower. So I think that what is the so you need to find the exact value that works very well for this speed of the motion in order for us to achieve the perfect motion blur. So it's lots of experimentation. Let's say -8. See how that works for us. And I think we might be actually quite lucky on that part. Yeah, we're kind of reaching there. I think magic number here was this. Either it's -9 or -10 and -9.5. Just to be sure what I'm dealing with here, it's definitely somewhere -0.5 to be exact, because we're using float, so it should be okay with that. To calculate the minor numbers after decimal. Yeah, that's something as I thought is. You can go -9.6 or -9.4, but this is something that you should definitely be expecting to get. So thank you guys for having me. I hope you guys find it very useful for your personal projects. You can of course use it and any animations you're working on, and I'm looking forward to hear from you more about what you guys are working on. And if you guys would like some tutorials similar to this, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll be happy to do something similar in the future, if not something even more interesting. And thank you guys for having me, and have a nice day.